imagine Sarah Breedlove Walker walking down her brownstone, maybe once cautious as she strategically plotted her way toward creating her Madam C.J. Walker empire. Courageous leadership might have initially painted a picture of an American dream that did not include black women as millionaires. Yet it was her courage that proved that our dreams matter too. Her courage we now see manifested in companies like Miss Jessie's, founded by Miko and T.T. Branch, and Shea Moisture, founded by Rich Dennis, to name a few. But if we walk just a little further, we end up on Lenox Avenue, where Marcus Garvey Jr. so elegantly sat in his car in a Harlem parade in 1922. In the storm of a cautious America, where black men were considered 3/5 a person, he peered out into the crowds of like minds and faces with the audacity of hope and courage to lead one of the biggest mass movements in our history. He inspired black folk around the world to take pride in our heritage. With a new narrative of economic and political freedom for black folk living in Harlem, it could only take courage to see yourself redefined with dignity. Recently, we've seen many of our leaders shrink in the face of adversity. Many have turned their backs on injustice and remain silent in the face of racism. Leadership is not a badge of honor one picks up at the local bodega. Leadership is earned. And if you want to be an effective leader, it will require you to proceed with courage and push aside your caution. The Webster's Dictionary defines courage as the ability to do something that frightens one. And for continuity's sake, the same dictionary defines caution as to avoid potential problems or dangers. Courage allowed many African Americans to escape the racial terrors of the Jim Crow South and head north to New York City during the Great Migration. And it was caution that prevented many of their counterparts from renting them apartments right here in Harlem due to the color of their skin. It takes courage to build a legacy, and it takes caution to prevent one. I didn't see myself as a leader necessarily, not until I was faced with a problem. And just like Madam C.J. Walker and Marcus Garvey, we all have two options: to proceed with courage or lead with caution. The problem with leading from a place of caution is that future generations are counting on us to lean into our courage. Making courageous decisions is not about being selfish, but being selfless, meaning leaders don't make decisions that only affect their bottom line, but future generations. Making courageous decisions, it's not easy. But then again, not everyone is meant to lead. Leadership is a privilege, yet we attach these labels to those who have not done anything courageous to earn their followers. Leaning into your courage takes vision and revolutionary acts. We've all can point to a bad leader. Many of us have probably worked with or for some of them. But courageous leadership is not about placing the blame, it's about making change. The problem that I faced is a problem that many of you in the room have probably experienced, and that's being one of the only ones in the room. It takes courage and time to flex your muscle into courage. And it also takes a little bit of resilience to flex that courage muscle. But I would ask you to consider 3 ways to incorporate courageous leadership practices into your workplace so that success doesn't benefit one group of people, but it's inclusive for all. That courageous decision that led me to create my company to help women of color prepare for their seat at the table. I realized that I first had to identify what I wanted to be courageous about. Because as a black woman, you often learn to be cautious at the expense of your own well-being. Due to the rubber stamp tropes that greet us our first days on the job, you know the ones. The angry black woman, just wait your turn, work a little harder. You learn to be cautious not to speak up when the company brags that diversity matters, yet no one in leadership looks like you. You settle into caution because microaggressions and bias have gotten the best of you. But as our elders would say, when you get sick and tired, you make a change. I got sick and tired. I decided that I no longer wanted to thrive in the workplace and I needed to survive. And that meant to speak up on the behalf of other women because we can't adjust to the status quo anymore. And what I mean by that is we have to learn to tap into that courage. And what I realized is that other women were coming behind me, and it required me to not just speak out on their behalf, but set it up so that they have equity. Not just gender equality, which we often hear, but racial equity. That courageous decision that I mentioned led me to create my company, but I couldn't stop there. Courageous leadership required another act, and that was intent. My intent wasn't to get my seat at the table and kick up my feet. I had to keep going so that other women who looked like me knew that there were tables waiting for them and that they had options. I needed them to know that they don't have to be cautious any longer. So in 2015, I created that company, but I couldn't stop there. Courageous leadership required me to have a second act, which was intent. I could not just say that I'm going to do something because courageous leadership takes action, not rhetoric. I realized that there were women who were waiting for us to step into our leadership so that we don't have to be the only ones at the table. The table looks better when you have people that look like you circled around you to help you and encourage you and move forward. Lastly, the third thing that I realized is that courageous leadership is going to take acceleration. Statistics say that women of color hold less than 5% of C-suite seats, and that a record number of black women are leaving corporate America due to the lack of opportunity, due to the fact that many of our current leaders are not invested in our success. And that was a problem for me. I realized that I could not wait. I had to act faster. I needed other women to know that there was a table waiting for them and that they had more options. I had to speak louder to let them know that our voices are no longer inaudible. And just like Dr. King wrote in his letter from the Birmingham jail, we will live in the monologue and not the dialogue. The acceleration process of courageous leadership required me to write a book that talks about the experiences of women of color in the workplace. We don't often get to read about our experiences. Yes, as women, we experience what many black feminists refer to as sameness, but there are many differences. Despite my fact of being cautious, I had to learn to tap into my courage because my courage was larger than my fear. Courageous leadership will require you to identify the problem. It will require you to mobilize your intent into action. And lastly, it will require you to accelerate the process for those who have been left out of the corner office. Whenever I start to entertain being a cautious leader, I think about one of the most prolific African-American leaders of the 20th century, Ms. Ella Baker. It took courageous leadership for her to organize sit-ins in the South at lunch counters. It took courageous leadership for her to move to Harlem and help build the NAACP. I imagine her walking down Convent Avenue, thinking about the current climate of our country, and knowing that she had to continue to be courageous for women like me and women like you. Had she been cautious in the face of danger, you never would have heard from the woman who found her agency to articulate being a black woman in the workplace on 139th Street in Lenox. I would have never been able to step into being a courageous leader. Thank you.